Hello, everyone. This is Cassidy Carson, co-host of the CC and JT Amateur Hour with my husband, JT, who is on the screen somewhere here. And we are doing our weekly podcast. This is one of our interview segments where we have a guest coming in. Today, our guest is Anthony Addis. Anthony, we welcome you, and why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Thank you, and thanks for having me. Well, I'm a British writer. I'm a teacher as well. I've written quite a few novels, but I've only published one so far, and I'm hoping to go back through the backlist and start publishing more as I go along. Part of the reason for this delay in publishing is I've been living overseas for quite a long time, and I've only come back to England in the last 4 years or so. And I was a full-time teacher, full-time parent, and so although I could find the time to write, I couldn't find the time to do anything with what I'd written. So now I'm back in England. I'm sort of making more time. The children have grown up, so I'm doing my best to get some of my writing out there into the world now.
That's great. And you did mention that you've lived overseas quite a bit. You traveling for work, or were you just exploring the world?
I was teaching internationally in international schools, so British international schools. So it was like teaching in the British curriculum, teaching in English, but in countries Egypt, Malaysia, Indonesia, and Saudi Arabia. So 4 different countries, and with 2 of those we were with our children. So they kind of grew up in Egypt and Indonesia.
Oh, that's amazing. That must have been a wonderful experience for your whole family.
It was. It could be quite intense for them, I guess, a little bit, because they were going to the same school as the school where their parents were teachers.
Oh, yes.
Perhaps they might have preferred a little bit more distance themselves. But for us, it was lovely. We would go in as a family together into school, come home together. It was nice. We really enjoyed it.
And so you sent us some snippet from your book, Do Not Keep Silent. And I did read through that. It was a very fascinating experience. The book is set in Hong Kong and deals with a British person who was born in Hong Kong. So did any of the backstory or any of the elements of that come from your time living overseas, or was that pretty much all fictional?
It was pretty much all fictional. The main character, May, is based upon 2 or 3 different people that one that I saw in Hong Kong, a lady who was climbing the rocks to go up onto the very top part of the peak, which is a hill overlooking Hong Kong harbour. Partly that I was wondering, I wondered what on earth she was doing going up there, far above all the tourists and all the people. What was her motivation for going up there? And there was a student in Indonesia a while back, and I was waiting in a cafe in Starbucks, I think, and I was waiting to meet a friend, and this student was with 2 other students, and they were just talking about the power of abstaining during elections and not voting for any of the candidates, but still writing to say that you didn't want to vote in that election, and what that showed the political parties about the kind of candidates they were putting forward for election and how powerful that could be, that political gesture. So May, the main character of Do Not Keep Silent, is very much based on those 2 ladies, really, one in Indonesia, one in Hong Kong. And I kind of amalgamated them together into this young firebrand protester.
And I did find that a fascinating idea, the ability to abstain from an election, because I don't know, JT and I kind of discussed that a little bit, whether or not that would actually work here in the United States, because we're pretty much given a ballot, we're given a choice of candidates. Sometimes we're giving the option to choose none of these candidates, but I don't know that we could actually get away with saying that we abstain from voting. So I found that a fascinating idea in the story.
I think she brought that up. I think she said what would have happened if Trump v. Biden or something, if half the electorate had abstained from that vote.
And then you mentioned that you had just come back to England about 4 years ago, and in this book you also mentioned the pandemic. So were you living overseas at that time?
We were in Indonesia. It was quite difficult, actually, because we were in a fairly small house. It was, my children were by that stage 18 and 17. They really didn't want to be quite so enclosed with their parents, and lockdown was very vigorously enforced there, and we were very careful. It was quite a scary time, the initial few months, and then we left in June of 2020. So we flew back to England with our 2 adopted cats, and we set up home in England again. So our son went off to university in Wales, and our daughter finished her studies in college just down the road, and then she went off to university.
Well, that's amazing. I can't imagine having to live overseas during that time because just being at home was stressful enough. But did you end up spending any of that time writing? Because lockdown, I know for a lot of us, ended up being something of a boring situation. And in our case, JT and I actually started podcasting, which
Oh,
has
okay.
turned into this process here. But since I guessing that you weren't allowed to go in and teach during the lockdown, were you teaching remotely or were you spending that time writing or doing other things?
We were doing live video teaching lessons to our class, so we had all the children in our class on Google Meet, basically just like a normal school day, pretty much. And that was in Indonesia. Then when the family came back to England for the first year, I went overseas again to Saudi Arabia, and it was just me by myself. So in that time, again teaching online, it was all locked down for the whole year. But I had to be in Saudi Arabia as part of the contract. So I had a lot of time to write because I was in a flat by myself, and again, Riyadh was very locked down as well. So I was just in the flat and I was doing a lot of writing in that time. Yeah. So as a writer, it was very productive.
Yes, it can be hard to find that time where you can sit down and actually focus without so many distractions. And
Yeah.
I know that JT was working on a project during that time as well. I think both of us were still working for full time, but we were working remotely. And then we were, writing when we had the time. And as I said, we started the podcast too. So it's just, we know that as writers, it can be very hard to find that time to focus. And since you were traveling so much and raising your family and everything, did you have a writing schedule or did you just write when you had the time to do so?
That really, when I had time to do so. It would depend on what stage of a story or an idea I was at. If I was writing a novel and I was quite in the flow, then I would definitely make time. I'd force myself to make time, and no matter how tired I was or whatever, I'd give myself an hour to 2 hours every day to do it, and a bit longer at the weekends. Something my daughter said one time really stuck with me when she was quite a bit younger, and she said, "Oh no, Dad's writing. He's going to be boring for a while." And I thought, oh well, I don't want to be that dad who's a bit distant because he's writing. So I did my best to sort of make my time outside of their time, as it were.
Your upcoming projects, the crime thriller, if that was Do Not Keep Silent, or if you're doing a separate one.
The new crime thriller is called No Way to Live, and it's half set in London and half set in the Isle of Man, which is where I grew up, a little island in between England and Ireland in the Irish Sea. So it's 50-50, and I wrote it actually in Saudi Arabia because I wanted to write a sort of Christmas themed book because I couldn't celebrate Christmas while I was there for obvious reasons. So yeah, I wanted to write a book that was not a sort of Christmas rom-com or anything, but a Christmas thriller, sort of not quite Die Hard, but that kind of thing.
Yes, Die Hard is definitely a Christmas movie.
Yeah, I've been in a few debates about that one.
So you
And the other
you
one
have the
is
political
sorry,
thriller and then you have the crime thriller, but you mentioned that you're working on a sports underdog story. So what is inspiring that?
that's based on my main passion as a sports fan, which is cricket. And there's not a lot of cricket fiction out there, so I decided I'd try and write. I like underdog stories. I like in real sports and in films and the books I've read. So I decided to try and write an underdog story set in the world of cricket, which is, as far as I know, not really been done to a great extent anyway. So and I wrote it, I finished it, but it turned out to be 2 novellas really. So I wasn't, and I struggled and struggled with what to do with it, how to cope with. I didn't really want 2 novellas out of it. So I've finally found a way to turn it into 2 novels, basically. So extend the novellas and make it a bit more, I don't know, a bit more pleasing for me. I wasn't very pleased with the end result of 2 novellas. The 2
So
stories weren't tied in enough.
it sounds like you're writing in a variety of genres. Do you have any
Yeah.
plans to take any of these stories and make them into series? Like you mentioned, the sports underdog would be 2 novels. Will that be basically a duology or are they 2 separate books?
It's a duology, yeah, duology definitely, because one is with the same. One is with the characters about 10 years ago, and the second one is the same characters but now in the present day. So it's catching up with them again after 10 years, seeing how things are going. So one is about sort of young hopefuls trying to make it, and the other is the other end of their careers when they're struggling with injuries and what they're going to do next with their lives.
That sounds like a lot of sports stories. I think even though many of us might not understand the cricket portion of it, I think we can all at least relate to people having those kinds of issues.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Let's see, you also have a short story called Life in Shadows that's about the writing process. So you mentioned that it's set in Thailand. Why did you decide to do that?
My wife and I, before we had the children, we went to Bangkok for I don't know, we were living in Malaysia at the time, so we went for about 5 days to Bangkok. Because one of the great things about teaching in Malaysia is they celebrate every single religious festival going. So Christian holidays, Chinese New Year, you get loads of long weekends. So we used to travel a lot from Kuala Lumpur to lots of different places during these little mini breaks. And one was to Bangkok. And we just visited the hotel, the Oriental Hotel there. And it's a real oldie worldy, very refined place. And I was in the lobby, which is this very sterile, beautiful place with lovely plants everywhere. And a really hot young man just ran through. He ran in from the outside, and he was really hot from the heat outside, and obviously quite stressed, and just got me wondering what was he doing. So I made up a story about him basically. He turned out to be a freelance writer who'd been commissioned to do an interview with a sort of a writer who'd written the great American novel, sort of a To Kill a Mockingbird type thing.
Mm-hmm.
A reclusive great, basically. So this young freelance was off to interview this great writer and hopefully learn some of his secrets. But on the way, he meets a woman who links the two of them in a way that neither of them realize.
Oh, that sounds fascinating.
Yeah.
Well,
I enjoyed exploring the writing process.
I think exploring the writing process is always a good thing, especially for writers.
Yeah.
So I guess now if we can move on to the question portion of this, we sent out a series of questions based on the James Lipton Inside the Actors Studio questions.
Sure.
And we have adapted them for writers. So I think JT will take it from here unless we still have connection issues, and then I may take over.
Okay. So let me raise my voice a little bit. Can you hear me now, Anthony?
No, you're very broken up, I'm afraid.
Okay. So then I will go ahead and continue on with the questions. So
Sure.
What was your I am a real honest to goodness writer moment?
There's been a few over the years. I really tried to channel it back to the very first one, which was about 20 years ago. I used to be a member of an online writing workshop for science fiction and fantasy, and it had a lot of members in it. And I used to post. I had an idea for a fantasy novel, and I used to post lots of short stories that were sort of character backstories and world building for this fantasy novel. And I was just practicing really. I was just getting the hang of writing at that stage. And there was a Canadian person that we used to share a lot of stories with and with each other and review each other's work. And a guy called Scott Clements, and he said to me, these are really good. Just get on with writing. Forget practicing. Get on with writing it. And actually, that helped me change my mindset a bit and think, actually, yeah, just do it. Just give it a go. Stop playing at it, really. So in the end, I never wrote that fantasy novel that I'd intended to write, but I did make a novel out of all those short stories and backstories, which is called The Tale of the Birds, but I need to edit it a fair bit before I do anything more with it. So
amazing.
that was kind of the main. I think that was the genesis of it, of that very first writer moment.
Having someone recognize your writing and say that you're doing a good job at it.
Yeah. It was really. I wrote to him actually recently and thanked him because neither of us are in that workshop anymore, but I'm very grateful to him for saying that to me and giving me the kick up the behind I probably needed.
So kind of along those lines, who would you say is your writing role model and why?
I've written a quote down for this after you sent me this question because I knew I'd get it wrong. So just excuse me 1 second. Right. So my writing role models are people like David Gemmell, Dean Koontz. There's a British author called Richard Osman. I don't know if you've heard of him. He's written The Thursday Murder Club. So I like his work, and I like Mick Herron as well, who writes the spy books, because that basically they follow this philosophy that I think Joss Whedon wrote. He wrote, Buffy the Vampire Slayer. And he said, make it dark, make it grim, make it tough, but then, for the love of God, tell a joke. And I've always really liked that, because I read, I like to read things that give their characters a hard time, for sure, but I also like it when there's a bit of fun in there as well, and it gets lighthearted. And I try to do that with my fiction. I try to tell a joke at times, no matter how hard I'm making life for the characters. I don't want it to be unremittingly bleak. No, so that's, that kind of writer who follows that philosophy, really.
Mm-hmm. No, I definitely agree that you have to have a little bit of lightheartedness to break things up. So what do you love about writing?
Okay, so the light bulb moments, when you think, oh yes, that's how I can make that idea work, or just a brand new idea of writing. Those, and also being in the flow when it just feels great and you're lost in your own world, and it's a bit like being a child playing, and you're just making it all up, and it's fantastic. And yeah, that flow, that rhythm that you get when it's really going well, but also the idea that you've done this bit, but actually it would be better if you did that and just tweaked it slightly. And so sometimes it's just coming back and looking at a scene that was written a week ago and thinking, oh yeah, if that character did that, it'd be better. So those little moments, those little just flashes of intuition that come out of nowhere, often during staff meetings in school.
Yes, that is true. It seems like they usually, I think it's because our minds are occupied with other things, and it allows the back of our mind to kind of take over a little bit. But yeah, that's why sometimes you're out for a walk or something, and all of a sudden you get that flash of inspiration that fixes a problem with your story. And exactly. I agree. Those are wonderful moments.
Yeah.
So what do you absolutely dread about writing?
It's the flip side of that. It's that moment when that light bulb moment, really, or really, I guess it's when the lights go out, when you realize that a whole week's work is going to have to be rewritten, and it doesn't work, or it's not quite happened the way you wanted it to, or you've written yourself into a corner or a character into a corner. Yeah, it's just that moment where you think, oh no, I'm going to have to redo it. Those bits. I mean, there's a lot of peripheral stuff to do with the marketing and all of that, which I loathe. But in terms of the actual writing process, I get excited by tweaks, but when it's going to have to be a massive tweak, not so much.
Yes. When you have to rewrite a large part of something, it's painful.
Yeah, definitely.
So we've talked a little bit about your travels and some of the inspirations that you've had for your stories, but what single significant life experience affects your writing for good or bad?
Travel, definitely. I've so many short stories and several novels have come out of it all. But I think being an only child has affected it a lot, partly because of, I guess, out of necessity. I developed a good imagination quite young and quite early, and my games that I used to play with toy soldiers and toy cars were very convoluted and intricate, actually, looking back on it. And I used to make up whole adventures for these characters. So I think that's part of it. But also, as a writer, it's made me fascinated by brothers and sisters and siblings. And a lot of my books explore sibling relationships. A lot of my stories, like Do Not Keep Silent, Pete and May, the two main characters, both have two brothers. Kind of. It's a bit more complicated than that. And partly because I liked the symmetry of them both having two brothers. But I also liked exploring how they reacted in different ways to their brothers. Several of my stories, the fantasy story that I talked about, The Tale of the Birds, that was all about sibling hostility, really, and his sibling rivalry. So I'm just fascinated, and watching my children grow up was always fascinating. The things that would say, the way that one of them would sometimes just come in intent on winding the other one up for no reason, it seemed. And still now, in their 20s, they still do it.
Oh yes,
I find it fascinating. I love it. I love it. Absolutely, it intrigues me.
That's actually a very interesting answer, because a lot of people talk about, some of us have been inspired by things like pop culture and stuff, but I think you're the first person to have mentioned that the solitude in your childhood was kind of, I don't know, maybe a formative process in your writing life. So that's absolutely fascinating.
Yeah, but not lonely. I wasn't lonely.
Right.
I've always been perfectly content in my own company, but I had lots of friends, lots of kids grew up in the area I grew up in, this little island. It was, lovely, really idyllic childhood, actually.
That sounds amazing. So, would you recommend The Writing Life to a loved one, and why?
Yeah, that's a complicated one, and I've thought hard about it. My instinctive reaction is no, because you'll do your back in. Don't do it. I've got chronic back issues these days. But yes, if they've got a story to tell or a voice that they feel needs to be heard, they should. They should, even if it's writing for not to publicize, but just to write. Yes, I think it's a great outlet for all sorts of mental well-being strategies, I guess. But for me, it's about writing the fiction. I just love doing it. So yes, if they feel that they would also enjoy it, and if it's not going to be a stress in their lives, then yes, do it and enjoy it.
Definitely.
But actually, I should qualify that answer, because my wife is always telling me I'm not concentrating in a conversation, always, and that's often because some character is in my head saying, "No, I shouldn't have done that. What you made me do. I should be doing something else in that scene." So it sometimes I think it means I'm not always completely set in reality.
Definitely. The mind wanders.
Yeah.
So, what is something unexpected in your past that we won't see in your bio?
Yeah, I watched a podcast that you did with another writer recently, and he said he'd agonized over this question as well. I found it quite hard. And the one I came up with in the end was, excuse me, I've got end of term voice from teaching. So you have to excuse my croaky voice. The one I came up with was, I went to Mont Saint-Michel, which is an old abbey monastery in Normandy in France, when I was doing some research for my fantasy book. And based on the research, I knew that it's set on an island about 300 or 400 yards off the mainland. So you can walk there across the sand when the tide's out. And I knew from my research that there's quicksand in that area. But still, I walked blithely across the sand and fell into a patch of quicksand right up to my neck. It's not as bad. It's not as dangerous as it sounds. It was just very, very embarrassing. Somebody helped pull me out once he stopped laughing. And it meant I had to explore this beautiful monastery, this beautiful medieval town on this wonderful island, absolutely soaking wet and covered in sand for the rest of the day.
Wow.
Yeah, but I think
that is
films. I think the Tarzan films exaggerated the danger of quicksand a little bit. So it wasn't quite as dangerous as it sounds.
That is definitely a unique experience, though, because I think most of us have been told that quicksand really isn't a thing like you see in the movies. But that had to be scary in the moment.
It was more the first thing that goes through your mind is, oh no, my wallet. Everything's going to be so all that paper. This was 20 odd years ago, so all that paper money and anyway, the passport. But it's more embarrassing than anything else.
We've all had those moments. So tell us more about where we can find your books. Do you have a website, and are you on any particular social media?
Yes, I'm on X, Blue Sky, and Threads, and I have a Facebook author page. And I'm trying to explore Substack. I've been told that's where everyone needs to be at, but I'm not there yet. And my website is anthonyaddis.co.uk. And my books are on Amazon.
That's great. Well, we thank you so much for being here with us. And this has been the CC and JT Amateur Hour. You can find this and other podcasts at www.carsonhume.com. And you can learn more about us and the fun and interesting people that we've been interviewing. So I think that unless JT has anything else to add?
No, I just wanted to thank Anthony for coming on board. This has been a very fascinating process, getting to look at the same business that we do from a more British point of view. It's been fascinating. It's funny how the two careers are on the same parallel track, just sort of sometimes accidentally overlap each other. So thank you, Anthony, for being on our podcast. It has been our privilege.
Well, thank you, and thank you. I think what you're doing in terms of helping people like me get noticed is really lovely. So thank you very much.
Thank you for being here.
Take care, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.